Sleep Dealer. Episode 23. I am the dealer of sleep. I cast portals unto your mind's eye as a crystal in question, one that reflects that of which you hath brought unto angels. Accept and you shall live in the realm of fairy god magics. Love, James. Sweet dreams.
Plug in to a new American dream. Sleep Dealer.
Go. Now I'm ready to rock and roll. Do a meditation at sunset or something fun, or we'll go to Red Rock. You guys have got to come. It's on the blog. Do you think we can bring in Eric Harris and what's his name? Oh, Dylan Klebold, the Columbine killers?
He goes, he wiped his brow. Sure, Mom. He's like, phew.
What was that? What was that for?
It's a tall order.
Okay. Well, then I better brace myself with a sip of coffee.
Okay, so he kind of stepped out. He brought forward the first gentleman. They must have been like similar in age. For those of you who don't know me well, I'm very disconnected to any sort of kind of pop culture, social events, current events. I'm very disconnected from all of that stuff.
Because you don't want the filters, or because you don't want the negativity, or all of the above?
All the above.
Plus you live on a farm, right?
Yeah, it's too hard to keep up with.
Oh, yeah.
But anyhow, he brings forward the first gentleman, and they must have been similar in age, because his energy is very similar to Eric's in certain ways.
Oh, great.
Okay, so then the second gentleman stepped forward on the other side of Eric. Eric goes, "They're all yours," and he kind of like pushed them forward, helped them step forward.
All right, well, I guess one question first of all, I want to say thank you for coming.
Of course, the second one that stepped forward, he's very grateful to have this opportunity to talk, he says.
Yeah, to explain to the world, what went down. Could you walk us through that? Your thought processes. Why? Am I talking to Dylan? Or
Yeah.
Eric? Okay,
Yeah, this is Dylan. Dylan feels much more involved emotionally with this event. Okay, to answer your question, why, he sits down and he does this with his face. He's like, whew. He goes, and then your Eric stepped in. He says, "Now, Mom, make sure you ask them the spiritual meaning or the physical meaning, because there's both. There are two different answers."
Oh, well, let's have both of them. Let's talk with the physical reason, the human reason first.
That's where he's going first. That's where Dylan's going first. He says, "I had so much anger and frustration for so many reasons built up inside me, and I didn't know how to let it out. I didn't know what to do for myself. I didn't know." He says he has he keeps going like this: borderline mental illness, and then he says mental illness.
Okay.
Multiple depression, anger issues, major anger issues, he says. So I didn't know how to deal with those properly, Dylan says. But that in it, okay, he's talking really fast. He says that in itself, battling that, what I had going on emotionally, left me on edge. So anytime something didn't go my way, he says, the smallest things would trigger me. He says just the smallest things would set me off and piss me off, and just send me right into that anger zone. So when I feel, he's very honest and very blunt. He says, when I felt like things weren't going my way, I wanted to retaliate, no matter what it was. Now, in this sense, why, I'm gonna quickly take out my earrings here because they're knocking.
Okay.
He says, now, why take so many lives? Why go to that extreme? I felt powerless. I felt very insufficient to myself. He says I didn't have any value. I didn't have personal value.
Value of what in life?
No, I didn't value my own self.
Oh, okay.
So I felt like, he says, I felt like if I could have control over others somehow, and again, here comes the language, but he goes, I know it's fucked up and I know it's twisted, but he says, if I had control over others' lives, I felt like I had power in those moments. I know that's not the case now, he says.
Well, did you do anything before this that, in a way of retaliation for your anger, like hurt animals or any siblings or?
He says not as much. because he felt, he says he did to some degree. He was verbally abusive, he says, to family members, friends. And then he says they began to fall away, like friends. He had less and less because he was verbally abusive. But he said retaliating on a minor scale wasn't enough. So it wasn't even worth his energy. He says, acting out in anger towards siblings or towards animals, it still felt insufficient. He says he needed to affect a larger scale. So, and then he actually says, because I kind of asked him again, I said, well, why hurt innocent people? Why did you do that? And he said, God, this is hard.
Oh, you can do it.
He says Pete, in his physical life, when people seemed soft and emotional, that irritated him. He needed to be around strong, ego-driven people. And when he saw... Go ahead.
Is it because he felt like they had the power of being vulnerable and he didn't?
He said, absolutely. But I didn't understand it at that time. He says, but it pissed me off when they were like that, when they were vulnerable, and it made me sick and it made me mad. And those were my targets. The people that could be soft and kind and happy to everybody and bubbly, because I couldn't be that way. And it made me sick. Like, he keeps calling him a certain word, and I don't know if I want to use that word because it's just not my vocabulary.
All right, but you don't have to. What does it start with?
A P. Soft people.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't like that word either.
Yeah, I don't either. But he says that's how I felt towards them. They were all soft. They were all mushy-gushy and emotional, and I couldn't be that way, and it pissed me off. But he says that feeling of control in those moments was fleeting. It was more disgusting than what I was doing itself, because I knew it's not a true sense of fulfillment.
Were you under the care of a psychiatrist?
Back and forth.
Okay, what about your childhood? How did your parents did you have a good parents? Good parenting? Did they do the best they could?
He says that was rough. It was difficult. He says growing up, he was difficult for his parents. And he says the older I got, like the more expressive I got, and the less they were able to help.
Oh, yeah.
Then they just they weren't sure what to do. He says, he just kind of stopped and looked at me. He goes, I know this is hard. Because he's conveying how much anger he had, and it's making me shake. But at the same time, it's out of love, to describe the situation. It's not like he's stuck in that anger now.
No.
But
it's
then
really
he talks about his partner, and it's like he brought. Dylan almost feels like
an AMV
he had all the ideas as far as how we're going to plan this attack. He says, I started with a lot of the ideas, and I brought my friend along for the ride, and it's kind of like it clicked with him. Once he shared his ideas with his buddy,
he said that's his nickname in our
Instagram.
He
says we gravitated towards each other in our anger and frustration, and it made us sick how people, he said, in the emotional side of it physically, he said it just made us angry and sick how people could just randomly be happy, and those were our targets.
It's horrible. Well, did y'all know you were going to die?
50-50. He says we kind of thought it might be a possibility. by the law taking us down, that might be possible. But we knew we had big intentions to create mass destruction, but we didn't. He says there's actually a huge part of me, this is Dylan still, that really didn't believe we could achieve such mass destruction. I knew I wanted to, and I was going there and I was going to do it, but part of me still didn't believe that I was going to do it. I was capable. So when it started happening, it was just like bulldozing the situation. Like once it started, I couldn't stop.
Were you scared?
He said, very.
Oh.
He says, in those moments when you realize the destruction you can cause, you become, he says, your own worst enemy doesn't justify how sickened you are by your own actions and how scared you are of your own self. Because he says, I felt in those moments like I completely separated from who I am. Growing up, he says, I had emotional instability, but you always think of murderers as monsters and something completely separate from yourself. And then in those moments, I flashed back to my childhood, he says, and he says it was like an out-of-body experience. I was viewing myself. He says it was me looking at my actions through my child eyes. And I was scared to death of who I had just become. And he says, I felt like I completely separated from my own self, from who I am. But somehow he felt, once he started, he was stuck. Like he was stuck and to keep going to do as much as he could, and then lights out, he says.
They took their own lives. Were you afraid to pull the trigger and take your life? I guess you took your life, right? That's what it said in Wikipedia. I just read it right before I started the session.
He says he wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid to die. And he says, more so because he says, I had separated from myself and my emotions, and it's like a complete blackout state of being, completely numb. Nothing affected me in those moments. So he says he wasn't afraid to die, and he says I didn't feel anything.
Well, what was I going to ask? It was really important. Oh yeah, was there one incident that triggered the decision? That was the reason why you said, "Hey, we're going to do this." Somebody made fun of you. A girl spurned your affection. Anything?
Yeah, he says yes. It's hard to understand him. He says, like, blah 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 blah, pissed me off. So I'm trying to figure out what that. It's like I can't understand that.
A friend or a peer?
He says I thought it was a friend.
Oh.
It almost feels like he's talking about two things that pissed him off. An instructor, somebody above him, like a teacher or an instructor, that I thought they had my back. And it's almost, unfortunately, this is hard. Like I thought they had my back in the class. Perhaps he makes me feel like he wasn't doing well in the class, but he was cool with his teacher, so the teacher was going to get him through. But grades came back, and he says, mine weren't so pretty, so I felt betrayed. That triggered spite, that triggered anger. But then also there's a connection to a female. He says, I don't understand. He's talking about, it feels like either, I think it's just a friend. It doesn't feel like a girlfriend, but a close female relationship. And he says, feeling betrayed again, but it wasn't intentional from her. It was more, it was like I felt betrayed because she could be happy. Other people could make her happy. And I didn't understand that because nobody could make me happy. I couldn't be happy with friends. I couldn't get to that place where she could. And for a while, he thought he was a source of her happiness. But he says, when I began to see her happy with other friends and other people, I felt very, he took a scale. Here's my value with her, and then when I saw her and other people could make her happy too, then he lowered his own self-worth and self-value based on that.
Sure.
And that, he says, it wasn't that he was pissed off at her, he was angry at himself because of what he and it's all this he says it's all I created. It's not, I thought, he says, I thought I was capable of making someone happy, but again, it was my own lack of connecting and making myself happy that ultimately disgusted me time and time again. I just couldn't see it that way. He always thought it was on the outside of him, other people, other friendships and relationships.
Well, does Eric Harris, well, first of all, do you have anything to say about the human aspect of what happened? And then we'll get into the spiritual, Dylan. But I also want to give Eric Harris a chance to talk.
Eric Harris steps forward, and he's very, he comes across very mature and very, very neutral. Like, he doesn't express a whole lot of emotion, but he's at a very healed state, is what it feels like. He has a much bigger understanding of everything now, he says, and even himself. He almost feels like a dad. That's how he's coming across, like just very intellectual, very understanding, and just that mentor type of feeling. But on the human aspect of it, he says, I had my own, he's pointing to his heart, he said, I had my own, okay, he says he had a hard time connecting to people and understanding them, and vice versa.
Okay.
And it's more like, he says that he was somebody who, anytime I had a conversation with friends, family, no matter what, he says he would externalize everything, and he had a hard time connecting to and relating to what people would talk about. So every time I'd sit down and have a conversation or chill with my friends, I still felt like I wasn't really connecting. I didn't feel anything. Okay. That, he says, led to frustration. He felt misunderstood because he couldn't connect, he couldn't express himself like he wanted to. And so he feels more like he went along with the ride. I don't mean it to put it lightly as far as what happened, but he says when him and Dylan got together, it was like, okay, this is going to be my outlet. People don't want to understand me, so this is an outlet where I can make you understand me. It gave me a sense of power and control that I felt like I didn't have, and communication. He says, I felt like I had such a barrier in communicating, and I knew something like this would not be misunderstood. Communicating this way. Now, when he says that, he's very, very emotional, showing a lot of remorse about what he did. But he says remorse with understanding. I understand why I did that, what happened. He goes, and that's right where we can get into the spiritual meaning if you want to.
Let's do that, but let's do it really briefly, because I don't want this to go so long that people see, it's 30 minutes, I don't want to watch this video. So, we all have short attention spans. So, was it a spiritual contract? If so, what was the contract?
Both boys jumped up and said yes. The contract was to raise awareness on youth, okay? He says this was, our spiritual contract was more to get attention at youth and the upbringing in youth and mental illness, mental health issues, emotional health issues, psychological health issues geared towards youth, because that's what we were. We're younger adults, and we targeted that age group. So it was more so meant to bring awareness to school systems and kind of open their eyes a little bit, not only about security, but emotional, mental health issues and psychological health issues can start very young. And he takes it all the way down to kindergarten.
Yeah.
And he says, our contract was to open the eyes and bring awareness to mental health disease in youth.
What do you think they should do with? Should they have some additional gun controls, or what can we do? Do you think to from your perspective as spirits, to lessen the frequency at least of these mass shootings?
He says gun control might reduce the frequency, but it's not going to cure the problem. He says what needs to happen is all the children, let them have voice. Now that's hard because you have to keep order to it when they're in a school system. He says, but we're so conditioned to think you're in school, sit down, be quiet, listen to the teacher. But you can't apply one thing to everybody and expect them all to saturate it the same way. He says children and youth, young adults need to have more voice and be more expressive to maintain a healthier balance mentally, psychologically. He says, if that's the case, if we can begin to allow youth to have a voice, then you're going to see less frequency of this, because kids get trapped. He says adults, young adults get trapped in feeling misunderstood or feeling like they can't say what they need to and they don't have a voice. Then that frustration just festers.
What about screening school children for mental illness? There's all sorts of different screening tests. Would that help?
He says that would be a great idea right at the age of puberty, because they're mature enough to respond as needed, I guess, on these tests, these screenings. He says that would be a huge success.
Well, one last thing, I would want to give you an opportunity, both of you guys, to say something to the families of the victims. Any messages for them?
They're both crying and thanking you for giving them that opportunity. They say, they're very emotional.
And you're picking up on that energy, huh?
Yeah. They say, first of all, to everybody watching this video, thank you for at least having heart enough to watch. To the families, we know the hurt we've caused and the depth of it. We hope that you can see the meaning behind it, and we hope that you can forgive us in knowing we didn't understand who we were, and we didn't understand how to deal with ourselves. And they both say they're speaking in sync. It's very fascinating how it's two different sounds coming across at the same time, but they say from the depths of our soul, we're very sorry for hurting your families. And we're very sorry for the hurt that we've caused ourselves as well, they say.
Have you had a chance to meet up with the victims on that side? How did that go?
They said that they did. They showed me that early on in the interview. That was gut-wrenching, they say, very gut-wrenching, because it was immediate. After they passed, they saw their victims. But he says the victims, this was why it was so gut-wrenching. This is Dylan speaking. He says, because the victims were waiting. They were, of course, there's a bit of a shock factor. He says, but they were waiting in understanding. And it was almost like the victims were waiting for the boys to help the boys transition. And so it was gut-wrenching knowing we had just taken their lives, but here they are still coming at us with love. It was beyond anything we could have prepared for.
And I guess that's because they knew that they were all part of the same contract, making sacrifices together. Is that right?
Dylan says, yeah, that's why they were waiting in understanding, because they understood at the moment of transition, they understood that they were a part of this, that this was a group contract. So that's why they were waiting for us.
All right, one last question. Eric, my Eric, you want to ask any question? Or can you ask one question at least?
He says, to you or to the boys?
To the boys.
Eric says, I love this. He says, he's asking them, he says, if you could change one thing about how this was viewed, what would you change?
Good.
And then the boys respond by saying, this is so heavily focused on guns that we didn't see, excuse me, we forgot to pick up what the underlying issues were, the mental issues, the health issues behind why this happened. This is how it happened, and he holds guns up and shows me guns, and he says, but this is where their focus stopped. They looked at the guns and they said, okay, we need more gun control, but they couldn't see past that. So we hope that this can be viewed more as, look at what mental health issues can do. Look at how it can really explode in a negative way.
It's not the gun that kills people, it's the person holding the gun.
It's the illness, exactly what Dylan says.
Okay, well, anything else before we close off?
Eric says, mwah, 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 I love you, Mom.
Oh, he always does that. I love you too, baby. Kisses back. And Eric Harris and Dylan Klebel, thank you very much for having the courage to share your feelings and your ideas with the world.
They both say thank you for giving them the opportunity to speak. They're very grateful.
All right. Bye. Bye,
Thank
Kim.
you.
I'll
Bye,
call you right
everybody.
back.
Okay.
Bye.